All right, man. I'm sitting here with my man, Jon Robinson. We call him J-Rob. Jon, welcome to the Intangible Podcast. Really excited to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Spence.
Yeah, this has been you've been at the top of my list to kind of get your perspective from a GM seat, and so we're really excited to kind of dive into it. But before we dive into it, you grew up in Union City, Tennessee. So you're a Tennessee guy through and through. And it reminds me a lot of my home and how I know. And, I just had a chance to visit down there as you laid your father to rest. God bless done so. It's rest in peace there. And,
sure.
But it was the nostalgia that I felt when I drove through that town was like, man, I'm back in Mississippi.
Yeah, not a lot's changed. A lot of people don't make it out of there. It's factories and farming, a lot of it. And I was fortunate enough to kind of carve a path, but the people there are really, really good. My family's still there. I don't go back a ton, but when I do go back, it's like the same bakery that it was 30 years ago. It's the same gas station that it was 30 years ago. McDonald's has survived, like it always does. But it's, it's a little country town in rural West Tennessee and good place to raise a family.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now growing up there, how did that shape your work ethic and the values that you hold today?
Yeah, I think it really came from my parents. Both my parents worked as when I was a kid. My dad, like I said, worked in a tire factory there for 33 years. My mom pushed papers around for a couple different stops. Both were very, very hardworking people. We had a little 15-acre farm that we had, we kind of ran some beef cattle on. And that was part of my responsibility. If my dad was working overtime, when I would come in from school, the cows got to eat when it's cold. Yeah. So I would have to get the tractor and set out a bale of hay if that needed to be done, or put out a bucket of corn, go chop a hole in the pond if it was frozen over so they had water to drink, all of those country things that you learn. And for some reason I had a passion for football and wanted to chase that. But all of those things, discipline wise, work ethic wise, commitment to, something positive in your life that, allowed my dad to have a better life, and he provided a better life for us than, maybe he had growing up. And then I've tried to do the same thing, as I've transitioned to my career in pro football.
Again, all the stories starting to come together while we get along so well, because again, a lot of my background was that farming, cows, growing cotton and soybeans, things like that, getting out early mornings on the tractor. It's a lot of work. And if you don't learn discipline and work ethic,
you're never going to learn it. You ain't going to make it. And that, or what else are you going to do? There's not, there was, when I grew up, there was one movie theater and it had two screens.
Is it black and white?
No, we had color, but we'd go to the Pizza Hut, and kind of hang out for a little bit, and then you could walk across to the movie theater.
Yeah.
Well, the shows they only rolled over like, once every 2 weeks. So once you saw the two movies that were in there, like you were cooked for 2 weeks. You got to find something else to do. So it was a lot of, just working.
As you start to think about what I want to do, I want to get out of this town. I don't want to stay in this small town. Football, I'm passionate about it. You go on and go to Southeast Missouri.
Yep.
As a D lineman, you become a captain. At what point did you start to think that, hey, my ability may not just be on the field, it may be off the field and staying around the game. At what point did you realize that?
Yeah. So I went to I knew that I didn't want to get a bunch of student loans and have a bunch of debt. I knew that my parents financially were going to be strained, to try to put me through school.
Yeah.
So that forced me to work hard to get good grades. I went to the Air Force Academy out of high school. I was recruited there, played there a whopping 6 months. It was just not for me. God bless our troops and everybody that serves.
Why was it so hard?
Oh my God. So it was, you kind of, and I get it now looking back when you're 18, 19 years old and you're going through it and you're getting yelled at constantly. Right. And it's just like, why do you not have this? And why is your shirt not ironed? And why is why is the header on your bed 5.5 inches instead of 6 inches? All those little things, it just kind of wore me down. I was homesick, right? Because I was a homeboy. growing up, coming through middle and high school. So I was miserable.
Yeah.
And looking back now, I understand the process, right? Because they're going to put some of these guys in planes, some of these ladies in planes, and they're going to fly into hostile territory, potentially. And if they go down, like, it's going to be 10 times as worse what the enemy is going to put them through.
Right.
So they want to kind of weed out. And not that I wasn't mentally tough, but it just wasn't a fit for me. It's not really what I wanted to do. So I was fortunate enough to transfer to SEMO, played there for 3 years. I realized I wanted to coach and teach.
Yeah.
So I got a degree in mathematics, was going to be a high school teacher and football coach. And then, in order to boost my resume, I thought, well, I need to coach at the college level. That looks good if, whatever, Graves County High School, pick one. If they're going to hire a coach, if you've got some college background, that would bode well in your favor. So it ended up working out good for me I was far enough from home. It was 90 minutes from my hometown. We were in the OVC. We were competitive. We weren't very good, but I had a lot of fun, made a lot of good connections. And, I've told, my two daughters who were, one's in college and one is on the cusp of going to college. And this.
It's flying by.
It's the education is extremely important, but the connections that you make in life are just as, if not more important than, the info that you're learning from a textbook, right? Because you never know who you're going to come across in life who can help you with this situation or aid you down this avenue. So all of those things at SEMO really, God had his hand in it and set me up to go on and, springboard as I moved up the football world.
Well, I mean, I got to ask, what kind of D lineman were you?
So I was a try hard, played tough. I was going to be where I was supposed to be. You could have blocked me easily. So I started out playing nose and 3 technique. I was like 275, 280.
Okay.
Which is good size for 1AA.
Yeah.
It's not going to play in the SEC. When I was in high school, I went to camp. I was you get all these letters. And I got letters from Georgia and Alabama. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to play in the SEC. And so I go to camp. I get a call from a coach to come to UT's camp in Knoxville. So I trot down there with a D lineman, and I'm kind of standing there. And within about 4 seconds, I'm 6'1"-ish, probably 255 in high school. And I'm like, yeah, I'm probably not going to play at Tennessee. I'm not going to be able to hang with these cats. I probably should have played offensive line as a center. That's what SEMO wanted me to play, with center, but I wanted to play defense.
Yeah.
Looking back on it, I probably should have played center. Not that I would have been good enough to play in the NFL, but maybe I would have had a cup of coffee as a camp invite, But, God had other plans. And
that's a coach fault. That's a coach fault, because I thought I was a D lineman in high school, and I was hell bent on playing D line. And my head coach, he was like, "Hey, coach," talking to the defensive coordinator, "Hey, can I borrow Spencer for a second?" And he come on, he draw a play up, and he said, "Hey, I want you to block down on this guy. That's all I want you to do." I block down on this guy, take him to the other side of the line. And he's like, "Hey, coach, he belongs to me now."
He's on offense.
He's on offense. And I never went back to defense.
Yeah, he's on offense. I mean, not to jump ahead here, we'll get to it, I'm sure. But that's a lot of things in the scouting world that you do is you look for athletic defensive linemen that you think could make the transition, over to offensive line. I can't think off the top of my head how many of those guys were successful, but your background on, playing defense, obviously your athleticism, it's pretty keen on your coach's part to see that early and switch you to the other side of the ball.
Yeah, he just wanted to line up and run the ball down people's throat with big bodies. So he was like, "Come on, we need this guy. Come on." Now you take your career from off the field and you're trying to work your way through, trying to figure out, do I want to coach? Do I want to scout? So how did you were building your resume? How did you decide that, hey, I don't want to be in the building coaching every day. I want to actually go out and travel and recruit guys.
Yeah, that was tough. I left SEMO. I GA'd there for a year, went to Nickel State in Louisiana.
Oh, yeah, the sugarcane fields
down there. Thibodeau down there.
Yeah.
For truth, yeah. And I coached the defensive ends as a restricted earnings coach, made a whopping $10,000 a year.
Yeah.
Did that for a couple of years, got promoted to linebackers coach, got a huge raise to $25,000 a year. I mean, I remember I went to Walmart and bought the biggest, they didn't have flat, well, they probably did. I couldn't afford a flat screen, but I bought the biggest tube TV that I could for the apartment. I mean, it weighed like 700 pounds. You would never buy that now. Remember those big ones, big old tank in the back? But I loved recruiting. I loved going on the road and trying to find players and bring them back and have, the defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, head coach at Nichols look at them and say, yeah, let's recruit that guy. Finding players, I kind of enjoyed that. And I was the pro liaison. So I handled all of the scouts that came through. We had a few prospects, no big time guys. I think a couple guys went to camp. But I just developed a relationship with all the scouts, and kind of struck a relationship up with Jason Light, who was with the Patriots at the time. Mm-hmm. And he said, hey, I think we might, the first year I was the pro liaison, he's like, hey, would you be interested in scouting? I didn't really know what it was. Yeah. I was like, well, I like recruiting, yada, yada, yada. Nothing ever really manifested. Well, then fast forward a year later, he calls me. I'm on the road recruiting in Houston. And he goes, hey, we've got a position open. I recommended you to come interview. Can you come in, Thursday? And I was like, well, we've got 4 more days to recruit. I need to recruit. Can I finish my trip and then I'll fly up next week? So it ended up working out. And I went and interviewed. I was the number 2 guy. It was for I didn't realize it at the time, but it was for the Southeast, which is the most talent-rich, place in the country as far as for draft prospects. And I evaluated a player. I read my evaluation to Scott Pioli, and he just kind of leaned back and was like, you summed that guy up in about 3 minutes, and we spent 3 months talking about the guy. And your final summation was what our final conclusion was on what we thought the projection of the player was. He didn't offer me the job. I go back to Thibodeau. He calls me 2 days later, and I had talked to my wife. Got married at the time. Met my wife down in Thibodeau, Jamie. And I was like, well, we're making $25,000.
It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money back then.
I mean, it was decent. It was decent. And I'm like, if they offer us a $10,000 raise, then God's telling us we need to take it. And our per diem for recruiting was $18 a day. So you got $5 for breakfast, $6 for lunch, $7 for dinner. Oof. Tell me where you can eat dinner for $7.
Yeah.
So I was coming out of my pocket to,
right.
Not eat Wendy's. Nothing against Wendy's or McDonald's, but trying not to eat fast food. So Scott calls me after Jamie and I have that discussion. He goes, hey, we want to offer you the job, and we're going to give you a 2-year deal, and we're going to give you $40,000 and $45,000. I'm like, and he goes, our per diem is $35 a day. And I'm like, I'll take it. Thank you, God. So I was like, baby, we need to root Chris.
So you take that deal and your season's over with now.
Yep.
So you're out.
It was in May.
Did you go straight to the road and start recruiting?
Yeah. So I went up and did kind of like familiarize yourself with the process, because I had no idea. Yeah. Right. In the scouting world now, you mostly come up as from a scouting assistant. So you're in the office, you kind of know the ropes of how everything works. And then if you prove your worth, then you're promoted to like a pro scout or like an area scout. Well, I was just a coach, right? So I didn't really see how everything worked.
Right.
So I went straight on to the road and went through training camp. I'll tell you, one of the most impressive things about Coach Belichick was I show up for training camp. We did it at Bryant College. I walk in the cafeteria, and it's the first time I'd met him, because I had just met with Pioli and Light on the interview. And he goes, hey, John, good to have you on the team. He goes, we moved to Atlanta so we could kind of be closer to big schools.
Right.
He goes, have Jamie and you got settled in Atlanta? And I'm like, dang, coach, like, how you know? But that's who he is, So there was a transition period for me, just learning the ropes of the road. I killed everybody my very first year. You have this from the outside looking in, and this, having played a long time in the NFL, there's this perception that everybody that plays pro football is like a really good football player.
Right.
And that's true for the most part. But there's a lot of guys that play that they have a certain skill set that kind of keeps them on a team, but they're not everybody's Aaron Donald.
Right.
Not everybody's Max Crosby. Not everybody's Chris Spencer. Like they're just not, So if they weren't like playing at a Pro Bowl level in college, like Boss Bailey was my highest graded guy. Big, long linebacker. Georgia's fast. He could run. Everybody else, like, I was like, well, they stink. I wrote like 14 draftable guys. There's like 150 guys that get drafted from the Southeast. So there was a huge learning curve, and I'm appreciative of the patience that Scott showed me, that Bill showed me to kind of learn the ropes of what plays in the league. And, to kind of spin back to that work ethic thing that you talked about earlier, that's where if I wanted to be good at something, and I always had that drive to be good, I was going to have to put some time in and learn what played in the league. So I would watch, the Patriots games, and I would watch our opponent, and just to kind of see, all right, well, this is really what kind of playing in the league.
What were you looking for as a GM? I mean, as a scout, when you first try to learn this process, it's like, I remember when I first started playing center, and I'm sitting there watching film, trying to figure out, all right, how do I watch this film so that I can go out and perform at a high level as a scout? What are you looking for? Because at the end of the day, when you bring these guys up and they draft them, you're like, I'm sure you're nervous. Like,
sure.
Man, is my evaluation correct on this guy?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, it's really position specific. It's like for receivers, not to jump ahead in this kind of show, but like for receivers, can they get open? Can they catch? And will they block? So different guys get open differently, right? Yeah. And I've learned that over time. But for certain positions, really all positions, you're looking for do they stay on their feet, especially for offensive and defensive linemen. Like you can't block anybody on the ground if you're an offensive lineman. Tough for you to tackle anybody as a defensive lineman if you're on the ground. So can you stay up? Can you play with power? Can you move people? Your quickness, your balance, your agility, like. How is your body control if you're a line of scrimmage player? When you're engaged with somebody, and two big, strong guys are pushing, do you have the balance and the coordination to stay engaged with that guy?
Yeah.
And as an offensive lineman, I think that like technique's important, strength and power is important, but at the end of the day, not to simplify it as much as a receiver position, is do you block your guy long enough for whoever has the ball to do their job?
Right.
If it's a quarterback, you got to hold that guy off long enough so he can throw it. If it's a running back, can you cover that guy up long enough just so the back can get by you?
Right. Just need a crease.
It ain't got to be pretty.
Yeah. Just need a crease.
Just stay on them long enough so that the other guy can do their job. But it was a long process for me. Really, probably year 3 is when I felt pretty good about my evaluations as far as for what I was looking for and how to articulate. The key thing in scouting is being able to take what you see on the film when you're at Ole Miss or you're at Georgia and you're in there watching tape and then you type that report up. Well, the head coach and the GM, a lot of times they don't have time to watch as many plays as an area scout.
Right.
So can you articulate in your summary of the player the vision? And, I learned that from Bill. Bill was like, if you can paint the picture of the player with your words so that when I read it, I can visualize him doing that.
Right.
And then when he puts on the tape to watch the guy, if you've graded him high enough, he wants to see him doing what I said.
Right. Right.
And, there's always back and forth, he might watch one game and I didn't watch that game and he didn't watch the 2 games that he played really good in. So that's where all the meetings and all the dialogue comes in.
So now you're working your way up through the process and now you're getting a good feel for it. Are you thinking about becoming a GM? Or are you thinking about, what's that next step for me? Is it, assistant and become a GM? And then how long can I do that job really well?
I was always kind of where my feet were, that oft-used phrase. So I wanted to be the best area scout I could be and let my work prove that I was ready for more responsibility.
Yeah.
So I went from area scout to national scout where I did the entire country. And then I went from national scout to college director, where I'm kind of overseeing a staff of scouts and preparing all of the draft stuff for Bill and Scott Pioli when he was there, Nick Caserio when he took over. And then it was probably about then when I became the college director, and some of my colleagues, Thomas Dimitroff was our college director, and he'd gotten the Falcons GM job. And I was like, well, like T got a job. Like, I don't know, maybe that's in my future. So I just tried to kind of master the director of college scouting role. And then probably like my last year in that role, it was like my 5th year in that spot. It was like, all right, well, I think I've got a chance to maybe run a team someday, but I need to take one more step and go and be a director of player personnel, where I'm kind of working alongside the GM,
right,
overseeing pro scouting, overseeing college scouting, and kind of helping with everything.
Right.
And that's where the opportunity presented itself with Jason down in Tampa. And I was fortunate enough to go down there and, learn a lot in that next role that, kind of allowed me to take the next step.
As a player, you're thinking about, I'm in my position. Here's, head down, you're working hard. You're not really thinking about the league. Hopefully maybe I get to the league, but then all of a sudden one day you're sitting at the table and you project to be a first round draft pick. So I'm assuming you're sitting back now, this opportunity in front of me. It's like, I'm ready for the dance now. How was that transition going from working your way through that process to then being in the spotlight around, now I'm about to run a team? How did you make that? How was that transition for you? And was it a lot of stress, a lot of pressure? Because again, thinking about when I got drafted, first round draft pick, man, a lot of pressure came along.
You gotta go play.
Now I got to go out here and prove it.
That's right.
Is that kind of similar as a GM, as a scout working his way through, as a player getting into that opportunity to be a first round draft pick?
Yeah, I think there's a similar parallel, as when you're drafted in the first round or second round. Really, if you're drafted in any round, you're expected to hopefully contribute. There's a lot of projection in some of the later rounds, but certainly your first round picks, you want those guys to come in and be a pretty pivotal part of what you're doing offensively or defensively. And similarly in the personnel world, when you finally reach the position that you've kind of been working towards for me, it was, 12, 14 years to get there. Mm-hmm. And then you're in it. First off, it's exciting, right?
Yeah.
It's like, man, I made it, I'm running the show, dog, and
I'm one of 32.
That's it in the world. And then it kind of shifts to like, okay, now what do I do? Because typically when those jobs are open, like there's a lot of stuff that needs to be fixed, right?
Yeah.
And there's no magical Flex Seal out there that you can just start putting on stuff and it's like it survives a hurricane. Like, you've got to try to adjust this position. You want to address that position. You're looking at the facilities. You're looking at the scouting staff. You're kind of, you're talking with operations. Like, how does the flow of the season go? Like, what is that? So your singular focus is no longer, your main focus is the roster.
Right.
But your responsibilities have now, quadrupled because you're over a lot of different departments. So you have to make sure you have a staff in place that can help you, which is what I did in my previous roles, whether it was in New England or Tampa, was to try to have everything lined up so that the roster decisions were at least a little more seamless. There's always going to be things that, you kind of got to work through, but I remember my first day here was I broke up a memo pad and I just started writing like doom, filled up a page of that page, flip to the next page, just stuff you got to do,
Right.
And then, you have to have extremely good time management skills. You got to be able to work on one thing and pivot to something else and put that fire out and then come back to this. And then another fire pops up. You got to put that one out. So, people would ask me like, what does the general manager actually do? And my answer would be, well, I generally manage a bunch of stuff, with the roster being the most important thing.
Right. Right. Well, now you're in a position where you run the show. You're here to lead. You're here to build culture. You're here to, really take big swings. And right out the gate, as you're trying to identify things, again, like you said, the main thing is a roster. You take some swings with a guy like A.J. Brown, Derrick Henry, Jeffrey Simmons. What intangibles were you looking for that had to be in those guys to say, hey, these are guys that I think can really help change our program?
Yeah, I think, before Derek was in the first class, but before, some of those other guys got in, it's the first thing you have to do when you're looking at the roster is like, it's, I don't want to minimize it, but it's a lot like grocery shopping, right? Like before you go to the grocery store and start buying, you should see what you have in the pantry and the fridge, right? Because if you got 2 jugs of milk in there, probably don't need another jug of milk. So you have to assess the roster, right? Like what do we have? Where are the contracts at with the guys on the roster as not just the starters, but the depth guys, the backup guys, the role guys. So that's the baseline is like, what do you have? And then what do we need? And then how are you going to start to address those needs?
Yeah.
So, and then that becomes a supply and demand thing. So what is the supply of players in free agency? What versus the supply of players in the draft? So if there's a lot of offensive linemen that are available in free agency, which typically doesn't happen, but there's not very many in the draft, well, you better shop in the free agency bin. If there's a lot of running backs in the draft and there's not many in free agency and you think you can get a running back, then it's best to shop in the draft. So that's how you go about starting to kind of, and you can't fix everything at once, right? It's, there's just not in one year. Yeah. Now, that first year, I think we did a really good job. We took over a team that had won 5 games combined in 2 seasons, and we win 9.
Yeah, I was part of one of those teams.
Bad memory there. But you talk about the culture too. That was one of the things that I think that was most important. Guys that are like Ben Jones, who is, I know you've had him on here. He's extremely tough. He's probably one of the 2 toughest dudes that I've ever been on team with. Him and Logan Mankins. Like Logan Mankins was a tough hombre now.
Yeah.
And Jonesy was the same way. But Jonesy was about, the right things.
Yeah.
Conklin was about the right things. It's like, so when you start to get guys that are about the right things, hard work, discipline, doing your job, like being prepared to go do your job. Because, you can attest to this. There's no difference there is a difference, but it's the same principles, in my opinion, for somebody that has a trade, whether you're a welder, whether you're a plumber, whether you're an electrician, whether you're a carpenter. Like you got to look at the plans first, right? And study like, all right, well, we're going to put this wall here. We got to cut this hole here. We got to move this wire here. It's the same thing for a football player. Like if you're not going to study like, A, how to do your job, and B, like who's trying to keep you from doing your job, which is the opponent, and how are you going to attack them, then you're probably not going to be very good at your job.
Right.
Just like anybody in any other trade that like they just kind of show up and say, all right, what are we doing? Probably not going to put in a good day's work.
Got to put the time in.
That's right. Yeah. So we were looking for those kind of guys, that were going to be committed to that. And I think we had some guys on the team, Delaney was one of those guys.
Yeah.
Lawan was extremely hard worker. Casey, Rack, D-Morg, Wood, all those dudes were, Marcus worked really hard. There was a group that was there. We just needed more of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you guys, you start looking at the foundation. You got the foundation right. O-line, D-line, good leaders in the locker room. Like you said, Wesley Wood, you're a great leader. And then you got a guy on the offensive side like Ben Jones, another great leader. And now you're missing a guy that can take you to the next level because this is a quarterback-driven league.
Yep.
And then you go out and you sign Ryan Tannehill. Tannehill had been around for a while. What did you see in him that, most people didn't see that ultimately turned out to be a very, very good thing for the Tennessee Titans.
Yeah, and he was an athletic guy. He had played some receiver at A&M. I liked the way he threw the ball. He had a strong arm. I thought he made pretty good. I thought he was a good decision maker. I think that's the most important thing with quarterback play. It's an talked about topic. It's decision making and accuracy are the two most important things, right? I mean, leadership and some of the intangible things, those are extremely important. But as far as for production on the field, their ability to make good decisions with the football, and to put the football in a place that somebody can do something with it, those are the two most important things. And, I thought Ryan was good at that. And, I love Marcus. He was extremely talented. He had been, it's unfortunate he'd gotten hurt a lot. He'd gotten dinged up. And we'd added Cass, and Cass had done a good job for us as a backup. We moved to Blaine Gabbert. Blaine was a good backup for us. And I was just constantly trying to upgrade, maybe upgrade's a strong word, but just trying to find the backup that if Marcus went down again, like that we could turn to and could
not have to revamp the whole playbook.
Just could roll. And Ryan did that. And it was very fortunate for us. Miami was getting ready to shift there at the position. I had spoken to those guys, and his agent had spoken. Ryan's agent spoke to me, and Nashville was kind of intriguing. And we ended up, trading for him for I forgot what the pick was. I think it was a 4th round pick. And then Miami actually paid some of the salary. So it was a win-win for us. To have him as the number 2. And Ryan knew the situation, and this is a testament to his character. He goes from a high pick, top 10, top 12 pick to starter to, all right, now you're a backup. But, and he knew this, just like that you got to prepare like you're going to be the starter, because you never know when your number's going to get called.
Right.
And Ryan did that. And, once we made the shift there to Ryan, and, we kind of got rolling and, made it to Kansas City for the AFC Championship game that one year.
What kind of conversation are you having with a quarterback? Because again, linemen, D linemen, we're kind of like, okay, we fit in where we get in, but like quarterbacks are a little bit more delicate. And you have a guy, like you said, who's, top 10 pick, been a starter, and now you're looking at him as a backup type guy. What are those type of behind the scene conversations like?
Well, I've always tried to be just upfront and real, with players, whether with their situation. I never wanted anybody to get the message misconstrued.
Yeah.
So we were very upfront with Ryan. We were upfront with his reps about the role, and there were no promises made, but it's like, hey, you could be the starter here. Like we're like, we want competition, and I wanted competition to push Marcus, right? I think that brings out the best in everybody, right? I mean, that made you a better player when you're going against another good dude for a roster spot, or you're going against another good dude on Sunday. Like, you're going to up your game,
right?
So that competition, and Ryan welcomed that, and Marcus welcomed that, and then the cards fell the way they fell.
Yeah. Now, when you're looking at all these different leadership positions, like what we do at, very personally what we do at Team Q, measuring all these different coachability, character, leadership, composure, things like that. When you constructing a roster, and you can't have too many of the same type of guys. What are those pieces that you can't see outside the athletic ability that you need to win ball games? Because it's not just always about the physical aspect of it. What are those things you guys? What are those things you're looking for when you were constructing this roster with the Tennessee Titans?
Yeah, I think the main thing is just dependability. The guys to hold themselves accountable for doing, their respective job. And B, if they had enough respect for them to hold other players accountable. Kevin Byard did a great job of that for us. Like he held guys accountable. Logan Ryan did a great job of that for us. We had a lot of guys that did that where, if somebody wasn't, and it wasn't like a yell at or blame or point finger, it was like, hey man, it was an encouraging, right? Trying to maximize the player's ability, whoever it was, so that they could help the team, which was the most important thing, but in turn help themselves, right? Because that's the way the business of the league works. Like you can't pay everybody. You've got to make decisions, and you try to do what you think is best collectively as a group when you get together and you make those decisions. Not every decision is the right decision. But that dependability factor, the ability to, and you know this better than anybody with the position that you played, that line, man, you 5 guys, you're only as strong as the weakest one.
100%.
Right. So if you got one that's lacking in an area, if 4 of you can't get them on the same page, it ain't going to go good, you know? So you try to at least have that, you know, a good foundation of dependability so that whoever may be a little less talented or a little less skilled is at least going to try to make up for that with their intelligence or with, you know, the style that they play the game.
Right. John, I mean, being a GM is hard work, man. It's a lot of hard work.
Yeah, I probably lost several years. Hopefully not too many off the old lifespan, but time will tell, I guess.
Well, I like to do a little 2 minute drill. It's a 2 minute going into halftime before we get to a wrap up here. And so this is no scouting report. This is just like good answers. Favorite underrated player that you drafted?
Favorite underrated player?
Yeah.
Ooh. I think it's probably KB.
Kevin Byers.
Kevin Byers, yeah. He played, you know, down the road in Murfreesboro.
Right.
He went to the Senior Bowl, but he didn't get a combine invite. So he didn't go to Indy, you know, with the other 350 guys that everybody thinks going to get drafted. But he had 19 interceptions.
Wow.
Which, I mean, like you don't stumble into 19 picks.
No.
Right? You've got kind of a knack for a ball.
Instincts.
And, you know, KB wasn't a big thumper, but like as a safety, a lot of those thumpers, like you either thump or you miss.
Right.
And like KB was a very consistent, like get them on the ground so we can line up and play again.
Yeah.
Which I think is the most important thing for a safety.
Right.
And you know, he had a chip on his shoulder. He's always played with a chip on his shoulder. I love that about him. He's a great guy. He's a great husband. He was a leader in our locker room. You know, I had actually had a couple calls to move back when we were on the clock when we took KB. And as soon as we picked him, those same teams that were trying to come up, I forgot what the teams were. They're like, well, you just took our guy. So I don't know how underrated he was in league eyes, but for a guy that didn't go to the combine.
Well, that's what I mean. You know, guys that are underrated coming out of college.
Yeah.
Funniest coach you ever worked with?
Funniest coach. Yeah, I don't know. There's been a lot. I mean, Bill's funny in his own way. You know, Vrabes was funny. Russ Grimm was extremely funny. Russ Grimm, our old line coach when I first got here.
Old school.
Excuse me. He would tell old stories of the Hogs when he was playing, and probably Russ.
Okay,
yeah, probably Russ.
A player who changed your mind for good or bad?
You know, I think probably in New England, it really wasn't good or bad. It was Gronk. When we took Rob, you know, I think it's been well documented. He's talked about it. Like he bombed the combine interview. He wasn't real good. And I really liked Rob as a player. Didn't know him as a person. That was kind of our first exposure to him. And Bill knew that I liked him. And, you know, when Rob left the room, Bill kind of gave me that Belichick glare. And I was like, and I wanted to crawl under a rock. Is he looking at me? We watched some more film on him, brought him back in, and his visit in Foxborough wasn't great either. But I still knew I had just a gut feeling of the type of player he was going to be. So, you know, I kept waving the flag for Rob, and Bill finally came around. We took him in the second round, and I don't know that he changed my opinion. He certainly changed my opinion on the way he was going to be committed to the game of football. Because Rob likes to have fun.
Yeah.
But he loves to play football.
Yeah.
And he doesn't let one get in the way of the other.
Yeah, that's good. One thing every GM hates to admit.
I was going to say like your mistakes, but like I think that's part of improvement, right? Is like when you mess up on something, like the world's not going to end. Like you just try to learn from it and you move on. Probably that they lost on a trade,
Yeah. Okay. I can see that.
Sometimes those are tough you just try to get it even. Yeah. So, and there's a lot of factors that go into those decisions, but probably that.
Yeah. All right. Last one. The weirdest draft interview answer you ever heard.
Oh geez, I probably got a million of those. There was a corner one time. I forgot where he was from, forgot his name, but we were talking, and he was a really good match player. Like he was long, and he was pretty physical, and he could cover. And we kind of get into the just tell us a little bit about yourself, trying to get to know him, and you've got 18 minutes or so at Indy, and so we had, I don't know, 6 or 7 minutes left. And we were like, why don't you get up there on the whiteboard and draw us up one of your coverages? So he starts drawing O's and X's, and, he's got 4 X's, and it's supposed to be an E, a T, and N, he's got X's up there. And he got
tic-tac-toe, baby.
Oh my God. He got zeros instead of like Z receiver, X receiver. And he starts putting heat where he's in there, and you're like, and kind of the question was like football intelligence. Like how much does this guy actually know outside of like, I got that guy.
Right.
And he goes, we call this coverage like 3 cat. We were like, write it up there. So he goes 3 KAT. And we just looked at each other. We're like, there's going to be a long road with this joker.
Oh man, I can't imagine some of the things come out of those draft interviews. So.
Oh yeah, they're fun. Yeah, they're fun. We like to play good cop, bad cop. When you're trying to kind of, because you're just trying to get them to relax because you want to know. And I've been doing some of this stuff, helping prospects prepare for those interviews, and they've got some of the guys like they've got a canned 15 minutes, and they're just trying to roll. So. You're trying to brush them off the plate a little bit with their questions and kind of come at them from different angles to get them off of their, stump speech. Yeah. So, but yeah, some of the answers are quite interesting.
I mean, let's get real here. What was your first year in the league?
I think 2001, 2002. It was right after the Patriots won the Super Bowl in New Orleans.
Okay, so
the very first Super Bowl.
So that means you were there when in 2005 when you guys drafted Matt Light.
Yes.
First round.
No, Matt was before us, before me.
He was before you.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, Matty got there in 2001 or 2002, I think.
I'm trying to remember who was the guard that got drafted 2005, the same year as I did. But now it was
probably Logan.
Logan, that's what it was, Logan Mankin. The real question is, what was your grade on me? Ooh, scary.
No, so funny story about you came out the same year Eli came out, right?
The year after him.
The year after Eli. Yeah. Like we had you up there. Like you were we thought a high level starter that was center that could play guard too. Bill fell in, like you went before we picked.
Yeah. 25th.
Yeah, because Logan was like 29 or something like that.
Yeah,
I don't know. We didn't 29 or 30, 28, something like that. But no, we liked you. No, you'd have been good for us.
All right. Now I'll slide you that 100 when you get out here. John, you had a lot of success in this, as a GM, but let's talk about just like, from a decision making on some things. Like, is there something that you wish you can do over again? And then if it is, what did you learn from it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you look back at every decision and you analyze, what did we do and why did it work? It's no different than, you know, the offensive and defensive coordinators, the head coach, whether to challenge a call, you know. In the GM chair, there's just those decisions are so magnified,
right?
You know, because you've only got 7 or 10 picks according to how much you acquire, you know, the roster decisions, the amount of money that you allocate to certain players. You know, those, there's not as many as there are play calls throughout the course of the season. You know, if you figure if there's 150 plays in a game times 17, like that's a lot of decisions. Right. Whereas the GM role, like there's very few decisions. Right. And, you know, everything happens for a reason. You know, it's probably something I'd like to have over. But, you know, comparatively speaking, the ones that we did make, I think there was a lot more that we got right. Than we got wrong. You know, so you just try to learn from it and move forward.
Yeah, which is, you know, in the GM role, you know, they think you just manage that roster. You talked about it earlier. You know, you're not just managing the roster. You're managing owners. You're managing coaches. You're managing the building. You know, take us through that process of, you know, even like all the landscaping and all the, you know, the fields. Like it's a lot of stress to be over all of it. You know, how was that process for you? You know, and what did you land and pick your say, hey, I can't do it all well, so here's where I'm going to put my stamp to really change the organization. Because I will say you did change. Yeah. You changed the face of what the Titans is today. Like you've hands down, you know, I can say that because it's a completely different organization now today. Yeah.
I think that the one thing that I tried to do was to treat everyone the way they would want to be treated, right? In their own respective roles, and try to empower everyone in the organization. And I try to do the same thing in Tampa. I try to do the same thing in New England, that their job or their role, whether you're the 5th trainer or the 3rd equipment guy or the 2nd football ops guy or the 4th grounds guy or the college director or the defensive coordinator, whoever,
right,
that the way that you do your job has an impact on the outcome of the game on Sunday.
Yeah.
So that, you know, now everybody feels like they're a part of something, right? They feel inclusive. And I think when you do that, you get buy-in, right? And people feel like, man, I've got to do a really good job of mudding these balls in on Saturday because like it could make or break the game for us.
Right.
Man, I've got to really do a good job of cutting the grass at the game field because that can make the difference in us winning or losing. And when you have, it's not pressure, it's like you're invested.
Yeah.
And when they feel invested in it, like you get a lot of return on that investment. And that's the one thing that I tried to do, is to just make everybody feel like they were a part of what we were doing.
Well, clearly you did a good job of it, because again, you know, to see when I came here and to see the shift and change is from a stagnant organization to, you know, now in a place where it's thriving. I mean, it always made me think back to David Cutcliffe. He always said, leave a place better than you found it. Yep. You know, you've definitely left a place better than you found it. And so that's, you know, more of the story is treat everybody like get them to buy in is by treating them with the respect that they deserve, and then people buy into who you are, and the foundation of the type of players you also brought in, you know, from that tough-minded. I mean, we line up and you got a 260-pound back there running downhill at people.
Could be a long day.
It's going to be a really long day. So kudos to you for having that mindset, and I'm sure that's a Tennessee thing. That's a homegrown thing. You know, your parents, that's what they instilled in you. And
and the most important, you know, of everybody involved. Everybody is important, right? But you know, the outcome of the season is ultimately determined by the players.
Yeah,
right. Like the players, like you guys. So that was one of the things that, you know, I'm extremely appreciative of my time in Tennessee and the opportunity that, you know, that Amy and Kenneth and Barkley and the entire Adams family gave me. But I said when I walked in, I was like, if we don't change the look and feel of the building when the players walk in, like the only thing that's really changed is the name outside of a couple offices.
Right. Because
anytime there's turnover at, the head coach position, the GM position, whatever it may be, the new person's going to come in and talk about change.
Right.
Oh, we're going to change and we're going to change. But if the players walk into the same building and they get the same feel, like they're like, what's really changed?
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, got a couple new people, but everything else kind of looks the same.
Right.
So, we came up with the idea to redo the locker room, redo the entrance where the players come in. And when, aesthetically the players rolled back in training camp, and they're like, they walk into a brand new locker room and the hallways look different. They're like, wow,
right.
It has changed.
Yeah.
Like, all right, let's roll.
Yeah.
So then you get buy-in,
right.
So that was one of the things I think that was certainly changing the roster and adding some pieces and players, but just the overall where you come to work every single day for the players so that they felt that change.
Yeah. Now, I've always wondered this, GM position is not like player coach, because a player can leave a place and go and succeed in another place, and he can go to another place. A coach can, it's like throwing a rock across a pond. You're not getting very many ripples when you come to this coaching tree where they can go in different places. But for the GM, why is it so difficult to do it one time and then, have some faults and then get another opportunity? Like, why is it so hard at that position to get multiple opportunities?
That's a great question. I talked to a couple people at the combine, this past February when I went up for a couple days. And you're right. It's, the GM position, you usually get, one shot at it. I've had a couple interviews after and didn't manifest itself. But to your point, when you look at coaches, you've got a lot of second time head coaches, whether it's, Andy Reid or Pete Carroll or, Dan Quinn, Braves' back end, so on the GM side, you don't have a whole lot of, you get one shot in the batter's box and, you're trying to swing away as long as you can swing away, just knowing, guys like Scott Fitterer in Carolina, he was there for a year and a half. Dave Ziegler, the same thing in Vegas with the Raiders. I mean, they were there for quick stop and then they were gone,
right.
So it's hard to climb back in the saddle when you're out. I don't know why that is. The league's changing and there's always I think there's this newfangled way of doing things. And at the end of the day, you're trying to win.
Yeah.
And everybody has their different methodology of how to get there, but that's the ultimate goal is to win.
Yeah. Yeah. Football is football.
That's it.
You got to line up between the lines and get out.
That's
there.
right.
So, as you are thinking about these younger, you talk about these young scouts that's looking to get there. They come in, they got their notepad, got all this confidence. What are those things that they are missing that that you can share some advice for them as they're looking to make that leap to get into the seat that you got to?
Yeah, I talked about this on another show a couple months ago. It's there's. Everybody wants to get in the HOV lane, the fast lane. They want to get a fast pass and skip the line. And I feel like that's just not in personnel. That's in everything,
Yeah.
There's probably 100,000 GAs across the country that think they're ready to go be the head coach at Notre Dame.
Right.
They've been coaching for 2 years.
Right.
There's just, it's, the microwave society. Everybody wants this fast bake. And, I'm 2 years as an area scout and I think I should be running the team. And, I kind of had that mindset in New England at the end because some of my colleagues in a similar position, whether it was Thomas Dimitroff or Dave Caldwell, they had gotten GM opportunities. And I'm like, we're winning here in New England. We're still doing what we're doing. Like when, then the selfish side kind of creeps in. But you just got to keep grinding and keep working and trying to learn as much along the way. I would say you can learn as much just through observation as you can through, verbal interaction. Like I learned a lot from Coach Belichick just watching him interact around the team, even though, he might not have known that I was observing. I was taking mental notes about things he did that I liked and things that I would do different if I ever got that opportunity. But for me, it's this generation of younger, aspiring. You just got to try to be the best at what you can be, right? If you're a backup, no different than the players. If you're a backup linebacker, well, then you try to be the best backup linebacker you can be and be really good on special teams. And then when the opportunity presents itself to be a starter, then go in and try to be the best starter you can be. Right. It's the same thing in the personnel world. Try to be the best at what you can be and let, the elevation kind of naturally happen.
Yeah. Well, I always thought that, a guy like yourself who have this kind of knowledge, should be in a position to, get another shot and also, mentor guys who will come along that process. Now that you've taken some time out of it, you've been doing some different scouting and writing reports and things like that. So your brain is still sharp. You're still in it. What's next for you? What are you thinking you want to do?
Yeah. I don't know. The itch hits you occasionally, you want to climb back in the saddle and then you're like, do I really want my brain to turn back on at 2:30 in the morning and think about this and how am I going to do this? Well, I got to do this today. And then by that time you can't go back to sleep. So you just go to the office. Do I want to really do that again? I get it, but your job, but people need to hear like these type of things, these type of stories, like, cause the behind the scenes things is, we're in a day and age where people want experience. So behind the scenes of like the content of what you're able to dive into, whether it's contracts, whether it's managing the culture of the team, whether it's like how you and the coach, sit and have meetings together. Like, I think people would love to hear and be a part of that. So, I'm sound like I'm trying to pull you into the content world. Well, I'm actually trying to start something. I've got something kind of kicking around. I've actually got to do some recording. I got to find a place to record it, but start a podcast and kind of talk about those kind of things and have people on and kind of have these, just chill, easy discussions called the J-Rob Pod.
You come up with that?
Yeah, I came up with. I went again. When you start trying to figure out titles for what you want to do, at first it was called Outside Looking In, trying to give people a view from the outside on the inside. It was going to be Out of Office at one point because I'm out of office, but I didn't think that really hit. That's actually on my logo though. There's a desk chair with a pink slip on it that says Out of Office.
I love the sense of humor in that.
But it's going to be. Yeah, J-Rob Pod, try to have some coaches on, try to have some players on, have you on, kick it around. It's like, I don't want it to be,
don't give away too much now.
No, well, I don't want it to be like this outlandish, but I also want to just kind of have some discussion. I'm not a comedian, but I want it to be, kind of funny and engaging and discussion. And I'm going on Good Morning Football in a couple of weeks to be a guest host for a couple of days. We'll see kind of how that goes. I don't know that maybe I'm not cut out for TV. We'll see, how that goes. But, kind of in my current space, I'm working with, as you said, evaluating prospects, it's a sports agency group, Win Sports group that reps a bunch of coaches, reps a bunch of players, trying to help some of our college coaches identify potential portal guys that submit, trying to help players, help some of those players that play for those coaches. Hey, where would I go? They submit their name to the league, but it's all, you want to get as many opinions
right.
about kind of where your stock is as possible when you're making those decisions. So helping the coaches do some of that. And then, doing a bunch of draft prep for, the guys that end up signing or declaring for the draft. And then doing a bunch of executive and coach prep, when they get ready for these interviews, because I've done that before. I've run coaching searches and put them through questions, trying to put them through that. And so that they get an opportunity. I was very blessed to have the opportunity to do it. And, that's every coordinator or personnel director's dream, is to be a head coach. I had that dream. So just try to help those guys prepare as best as possible so that when they get the when they get an opportunity, they don't swing and miss.
Yeah. So you still in it, man. You found different lanes where you can still impart this wisdom, this knowledge to people that are looking to get to that place that you've gone to. So I'm excited. I'm excited to track it, and I mean, at some point, hopefully, I can jump on with you and let's actually
great.
talk about ball and not get into the intangible
side. Jet protection. See if you check your recall.
I still remember some of those. Yeah, I still got some of those. So no, I'm excited to see that come alive for you. My last question for you as we wrap up though is, when you look back over your lifespan of your career, your playing days, what are a couple of intangibles that, has made, J. Rob who he is today?
Yeah, I think it's definitely, you've got to find something that you're passionate about, right? Like I said earlier, when we started, I went to the Air Force Academy. I was going to get this degree in engineering, and then I was going to go to law school, and try to be a lawyer about, environmental engineering. And the more I thought about that at 19 years old, I kind of got hit in the face. It was like, what do you know?
Yeah.
I mean, you're not passionate about that, I'm glad we have it. I think the environment's important.
Right.
Engineering is certainly important. Lawyers. Yeah, sometimes. But I was passionate about football. So I knew I was good enough to play collegiately. I quickly realized that I wasn't going to make a career out of playing. So you got to pivot, right? And you got to find like what are you passionate about? What drives you? And then all the stuff that, that kind of how you were brought up, or that's just kind of intrinsically inside you, like your hard work, your dedication, your commitment, your discipline. All of those things kind of kick in and help drive that passion to where you want to go. There's a lot of people probably going to listen to this. Some of them are high school kids. Some of them are in college. Some of them are in different fields. Not everybody has to be involved in football, but if you have a passion, whatever you're passionate about, then chase it till you can't chase it no more. It certainly worked out for me. You never know what, path the good Lord's going to lead you down. You just got to trust him and follow when he opens the door, and you've got to work at it. Yeah. It's not easy. It's a grind. There's countless times when I was an area scout that I wanted to quit, when I was staying at some seedy hotel in the middle of nowhere. And it's like, what am I doing? And it's just like, you get up the next day and it's a new day and you're rolling. So
it's passion and work ethic.
Yeah.
And you can do it all. You can do whatever you decide you want to do.
I believe that.
Yeah. Well, I actually lied. I just, thought of one other thing. I feel like I need to have one funny Bill story before we wrap.
Oh,
one that you can tell on air.
Well, this will probably be a rehash if I ever get my pod off the ground. But we were in the draft room, and it was back when, there was really just 2 days of the draft. You had first, second, third round, and then you had Saturday was the rest of it. So we were sitting there on Saturday, and there was a player up there, and they had found something in Indy that, was pretty serious, which the combine does a great job of that, identifying things, whether it was some guy, they found a tumor on his knee or in his calf. And it's an extensive, which is, an important part of the combine is all of the medical information. Right. So they ID a lot of things on players that, sometimes go unnoticed. Yeah. So this player had something, and it was a pretty critical situation. And, the player was a fairly highly rated player. I'm not going to give his name or position. Or his situation. But it was like the 5th round or 6th round or so. I can't remember what round it was, maybe 7th round. And Bill looks over at me and he's like, "Hey, J-Rob." He's like, "What's a story with so-and-so?" I'm like, "Well, he had this thing, coach, and da-da-da." He's like, "Oh, yeah." So he gets on the phone and calls the trainers and the doctors. It's the first time they've come in the draft room. Now, anytime you have a medical question, they roll in with these giant binders. They got all of these MRIs and X-rays, and they
My
come in.
binders like that thick when I left.
I mean, they're big boys. And they all roll in, and they're kind of nervous. They've been called into the draft room during the draft. They open up their books, and Bill looks at them. He goes, "What's the story with so-and-so?" So the trainer goes into da-da-da-da-da. He's got this, and the doctor chimes in. And he's like, "Well, so what do we think?" And they're like, "Well, he's going to do this and he's going to do that." And Bill's like, "But what's the worst thing that could happen?" and the trainer goes, "Well, he could die." And Bill goes, "Yeah, but other than that, we think he'll be all right."
Oh my God.
So the trainer's like, "I mean, yeah, we think he'll be all right. I mean, if all comes out all right, yeah, he'll be all right." So, and he goes, "All right, thanks, guys." They get their books and they scuttle back out. It's just that, but
that's football, man. It reminds me of when I hurt my back one year doing training camp. And I was in there squatting, had just come off shoulder surgery, in there squatting too heavy. And then all of a sudden get a bulging disc in my low back. And Mike Holmgren comes in after I got, I think we had just started practice, hit a sled, and I just went down. And I'm laying on the training table. Mike comes in. He's like, "You all right?" I'm like, "Yeah, I think I'm just, sore right now. I think I'll be all right." He's like, "All right." Well, fast forward about a week later, I'm still not back at practice. I have my second epidural shot in my back. And he looks at me, he comes in, he said, "Hey, young man, let me tell you, I've seen this happen before. You know how when you popped that sled, you went down? If you go back out and pop the sled again, it just miraculously heal itself. So let's go ahead and try that." I'm like, "Yeah, no.
I don't think that really works, Coach.
I don't think that's how that goes." But he started laughing, and I started laughing. I'm like, "But that's football. It's like, hey, how quickly can we get you back on this field?"
Yeah,
and we need you.
The team needs you. It's return on investment from a salary. I mean, it's everything, right? But we always said, the most important thing is the player's health and safety, right? Because the game's going to end at some point for everybody.
Right.
And the health and safety of the players, if the player can't protect himself or he's going to make it worse, put him out there, then don't put him out there.
Right.
Put somebody out there. Because the problem is, not to nerd out here on roster stuff for game day, but you only got 46, I think maybe 48 dudes now. And if you're counting on this player to go do something, and then mid first quarter, you realize he can't do it. Now you're down to 47 or 45, so you're short a guy.
Right.
So all of those decisions, you'd rather have a healthy guy go out there that's maybe less skilled that can actually play 4 quarters.
Right.
Than, somebody that may play 8 minutes, because then that's a long Sunday if you ain't got that dude, and you're short a guy. So
been there. Well, J-Rob, man, I really appreciate the time. This has been awesome. Look forward to seeing your podcast and things that you're doing come out. And we actually may have to come back and do this again and talk about some of the other side of the roster construction. So I really enjoyed it, man.
Enjoyed it, bro.
You.
Appreciate you.
Yeah.